Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. I'm Andrea Tredden, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for Heartbeat International. Across the Pregnancy Help movement, we've seen a growing emphasis on reaching fathers, with more organizations developing programs specifically designed to engage and support the men walking through their doors. It's an encouraging shift, recognizing that serving families well means finding meaningful ways to reach both mothers and fathers. Today, we're talking about what can happen when pregnancy help organizations intentionally reach these men, not simply to teach them how to be better fathers, but to disciple them into the men God called them to be. Joining me today is Justin Morris, Director of 27, a fatherhood ministry in Memphis built around biblical discipleship and a vision for generational transformation. Justin, welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast.
Good morning, Andrea. Thank you. Nice to be with you. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun day. We were already talking about, I like to go rogue. And so we're going to go off script a little bit, but we're going to have some fun to get to know you and get to know how, just the impact that you guys have been having, within Memphis and surrounding areas has been really fun to witness. Of course, I was reading Pregnancy Help News and learned more of your story. I'm really excited to talk more about that. But before we get to 27, I would love to hear a bit more about you, get to know you a bit more, and how you were brought to life choices.
Well, that's a very long story. I'll give you the abbreviated version of the Cliff Notes. How about that? In a previous life, I was a church planter and pastor. Did that twice. About 25 years ago, what was discovered is that I had a raging addiction to prescription painkillers. And when that came out, my whole world blew up. Of course, internally, everything was a mess anyway, but my marriage, my finances, my family, my ministry, my reputation, just gone. So what began as an awful story of destruction and the consequences of sin has become an incredibly redemptive story, beautiful story. My wife and I celebrated our 37th anniversary last month. We have 4 kids, 3 kids-in-law, 6 grandkids. Couldn't be stronger, couldn't be more connected. God's just done an incredible worked an incredible work in our lives. But when all that happened over 20 years ago, I basically disqualified myself, kind of put myself on the shelf, damaged goods, ministry's over, go make a living somehow, but you're disqualified from ministry. And of course, there should have been a season, to get my life in order. But about 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago, through circumstances and through just really internal prompting that was very evident, it became clear that God was reorienting our lives, my wife and me, reorienting our lives back into vocational ministry, which came as a shock. Had no idea what that would look like, what the platform would be, how we'd pay bills, didn't know anything. But the answer was yes, God, whatever it is, yes. And so I did what everybody does these days. I started my own podcast. I created a 501c3 called Think and Live Biblically Ministries, which still exists. Under that ministry, I do men's Bible studies, discipleship, pre-marriage counseling. And the umbrella of that ministry is what enabled me to connect to Life Choices here in Memphis. So one of the board members had seen the podcast. I've known her for many, many years. She saw the podcast and she knows my wife well. And she was talking to my wife, Becky, one day, and she said, Life Choices for years has wanted to start a men's program. In fact, we've tried to start a men's program and we haven't been able to get it off the ground. Do you think Justin would be interested? So in October of 2024, I met with our CEO and Rachel. Rachel was in that very first meeting. And among the things I heard is a great conversation, but 2 things just grabbed me in that meeting that have been instrumental in this program. The first thing that really shocked me was that of all the women who come into our center, 40% of the time, the father of the baby is with them. Now, that may be kind of normal across the country, but this is in Memphis. And certainly not exclusively, but primarily, our clientele, our demographic is low income, urban, inner city, with a catastrophic legacy of family and fatherhood in particular. So the fact that 40% of the time these young men were walking in the office, that just blew me away. Literally the mission field walking in the door. And this is true of all of us. It's particularly true in a place like Memphis. All the chaos and dysfunction out in the community and the culture, government can't fix it. More money can't fix it. And those things just make it worse. We've learned that. The only thing that's going to fix it is fathers in the home, connected to their children, ideally godly fathers. So that's where the idea came from, is just hearing that number. And then in the course of that conversation, I mentioned just in passing something about saving babies, because I'd known about life choices for decades. And Rachel said, well, Justin, we're not here to save babies. And I said, what do you mean you're not here to save babies? I thought that's exactly why you're here. And she said, no, we are here for generational transformation through the gospel. I was hooked. I'm on. How do we do this? Let's go. I was all in as soon as I heard that statement. And of course, in the process of generational transformation, babies will be saved, but it's about a lot more than that. So that's where the whole vision came from, that very first meeting, reaching fathers, aiming for generational transformation.
I love that. And I know that that is a phrase that comes up again and again, because this is, I'll say, not your standard men's program. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
Built right into our logo, generational transformation. That's what we do.
And it is a mind shift to do that, because you're going from practical needs where you're checking boxes and making sure that they are equipped, to inspiring them to want to be better in all aspects of life. And it is fantastic. And thank you for giving us that context.
Well, in Memphis, as in many cities, urban centers, the epidemic of fatherlessness is catastrophic. And one of the things we say, 95% of the young men who walk in here, we like to say, he has never seen the man he's supposed to be. That's tragic.
Yeah.
So we have to be that man. We want to give him a man that is a man he's supposed to be. I've had stories. My goodness, could I tell you stories? One of my favorite stories wasn't with me. One of our mentors, he invited his young man, the guy he's connected to. The mentor's little 2-year-old daughter was having a birthday party, so they were just having it at home. So he invited his young man, his disciplee, his mentee, to come to the birthday party, and he did. And at that birthday party, the young man told his mentor, his discipler, he said, "This is the first time I've ever seen a family together." That's mind-blowing. He'd never seen a family together, much less a godly family, an intact, Christ-centered, godly family. And the obvious message for the mentor is, this can be you. This can be yours. And so that's what we're aiming for in everything that we do, that kind of transformation.
So that's a great segue into my next question, because what changed when you began looking at the men walking through your doors, not simply as boyfriends or partners, but as people that you had that opportunity to reach? How did that change within your center?
Well, one of the benefits of the way we started, one of the great gifts God gave us was total ignorance. I had no idea what I was doing. Life Choices is very established. It's an incredible center, full scope of services, incredible staff, all the things you want in a pregnancy center. But they didn't know how to do fatherhood or men's program. I'd never done anything like this. And in hindsight, I liken them starting this ministry. They dumped a 500-piece jigsaw puzzle on the table and said, "Here, Justin, it's all yours. Total ownership, full autonomy. Let's build this thing." But they didn't have a box with the picture on it. So I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea that Heartbeat existed. I didn't know about any fatherhood, pregnancy center, resources. I didn't know any of that was out there. But I did know discipleship. And I did know connecting with young men, get them plugged into the Word of God. And so by default, I wouldn't say by accident at all, by providence, This thing was simply launched in a different way. So it was never designed or initiated to mirror a women's program. It's not intended to get practical fatherhood help. It's intended to make disciples. So we start with the gospel. We don't shy away from that. We are gospel driven. I've led nearly 20 young men to Christ right here in my office. Our mentors have led young men to Christ. We get them plugged into the Word of God. And here's the two convictions, just very hardcore convictions that this ministry operates from. The first is the purpose. Our purpose is generational transformation. And we say it over and over and over. Everything we do every day is for generational transformation. The second key conviction is how we do that. And it's very important. It really defines what we do. I believe that if I have the Spirit of God inside of me and the Word of God in front of me and a man of God who will walk with me, my life will be transformed. It's inevitable. It is going to happen. But all three ingredients have to be in place. So I can have a great friendship. Another man and I can have the Spirit of God inside of us, and we can walk along each other and have a relationship. But if it's not rooted in the Word of God, it can be encouraging, it can be fun, but it's not going to be transformative. So that's the premise with what we do. We lead with the gospel. We lead young men to Christ. Not every one of them. I've got a couple of young Hindu fathers in this program. I've got an agnostic in this program. But we lead with the gospel. Everything we do is biblical. Literal Bible studies is what we do. And we do it with connecting them to a godly man who walks with them. It's really that simple, but it changes lives because I think it's the biblical pattern of spiritual growth.
So when you introduced 27 into the organization, the initial men that you connected with, how did they receive it?
The center was from every single person on the board, every single staff member down to a person. I could not have been more welcomed, more embraced. Absolute, universal, 100% enthusiastic support from day one, which is an incredible blessing because not all men share that experience with their centers. So the center was all in. I really don't know how it affected anything because there had been nothing before. Men would come in on the first visit, they would leave, and they'd never be seen or heard from again. That was that. We didn't know who they were. We had no information. There was just nothing here to even reach out to them, much less engage them. Speaking of when things began, there's one young man in particular. He's featured in the article that you mentioned. His name's Reggie. And everything always comes back to Reggie. If I talk about this very long, I'm going to talk about Reggie. He's the prototype.
He's your prototype. Yeah.
He is. The very first, this is extraordinary what God did for us and for me. The very first young man who walked through the door when we said, yeah, let's do this thing. And I was a volunteer, by the way. I volunteered for 8 months, and then I was part-time for a year. I've just recently come on full-time. But as a volunteer, the very first time I met with Reggie, we met at Panera Bread. He received Christ that night. The next week, Reggie showed up with Bible apps on his phone. The next week, he showed up with a physical Bible. That was 19 months ago. This morning, Reggie, I can just guarantee you, Reggie spent his time in the Word of God. He does a daily reading plan with me. He's working through the book of Romans on his own with his ESV study Bible. Back in January, he married his girlfriend, and everything you could want a ministry to produce in a young man, Reggie has become. It's just really extraordinary. Now, obviously, not all the men are like Reggie. We don't have the same results with all of them, but there are 1,000 other Reggies out there. And so our ambition is to reach those guys, connect them to Jesus, connect them to the Word, connect them to a godly man, and see generations transformed through their legacy.
And how was the introduction to Reggie? Like, walk us through that. I'm assuming he was one of the 40% who came with his girlfriend to the center. And then what next?
Well, probably then. I don't remember the specifics. But I had no format, no program, no material. I had nothing. I think he left his information, if my memory is correct. Because I was hardly ever at the center. As a volunteer, maybe 8 hours a week, working from home, doing other things. So I was probably given his name and phone number. I just called him and said, "Hey, you want to get together Thursday evening?" And he said yes. Of course, we've programmed it more now, and we've formalized it more now. One of the ways we're different than most men's programs that I've engaged with and talked to, when a young man comes in on that first visit, I want to meet him. I don't want to meet with him. That's not the intake meeting, for 3 reasons. Number one, I don't think it's fair to him because he walked in to accompany her with no expectation that anyone's going to talk to him about anything. And I don't think it's fair to then drag him back to my office and to a men's room and say, "You're going to sit down for this meeting that's totally unexpected." So I want to respect him in that regard. Number two, I want to schedule a meeting when I meet him in reception, make an introduction, introduce the program. "Hey, we've got support for you. I'd love to get together, tell you about it, hear your story. Would you like to schedule a meeting with me?" When they do that, and most of them schedule the meeting, but that's his first test. Is he going to show up for that meeting? 75% of the men who make appointments with me don't show up. 75%. Probably not uncommon. So the biggest change, the biggest significant kind of procedural change we've made just in July, just a few weeks ago, we began incentivizing their involvement in the program. So now, as of July the 1st, if they show up to meet with me, they get a $50 gift card. And once we have that meeting, if they want to be in the program, I hand them off to their mentor, their discipler. If they show up for their first meeting with him, they get another $50 gift card. And then we've written our own curriculum. And so far, we've got 3 components in place. They're kind of mandatory sequential Bible studies. And for each, and no one's completed all 3 yet. It's all pretty new. But for every one of those studies he completes, he gets a $100 gift card. So all in, it's $400. But it's going to take 9 months to a year for him to go through that process. So our thinking is, if a young man goes through that, he'll be deeply connected to his discipler. He'll be deeply rooted in the Word of God. His life has been transformed for $400. That's not much to pay for that kind of transformation. So we have kind of formalized the process now, and it's pretty efficient. And still a lot of guys don't show up. We don't control that. That's the nature of the beast, I think, for all of us in this line of work. Same thing's true with women.
And actually, that was what came to mind as you were saying that it's learning from what we've done for the past several decades in the pregnancy help centers to connect with women. It's an adaptation of earn while you learn to incentivize the men to join in. And to your point, you are investing in them, and they are investing in themselves by accepting those meetings and then by growing that and diving in and making that commitment. I really do appreciate how you delineate it. Like that first time they come into the centers, they are not meeting with you. You meet them because they're with their girlfriend at that point. And that is a huge step in and of itself. So it's like the fact that they showed up there is great. And then you want to keep them involved in that part. So that does make it an extension of the services provided through the discipleship program. So I love that you guys recognized that at the onset and really did formalize that in different ways. Now, hopefully, the incentive program helps grow those numbers, and we will be following that because I do think that is a great adaptation of a system that we've had in place for years for families to encourage them to dive deeper into their own transformational growth.
Yeah. Well, anecdotally, we're 6 weeks in. I haven't tracked the numbers, but just my experience is telling me the numbers are better. We're never going to flip it. We're never going to have a 25% no-show rate. But what if we get it to 50? That'd be amazing. That'd be 30 or 40 men a year plugged into the program. So I did mention the reason I don't meet with them. One, I don't think it's fair. Number two, their scheduled meeting is their first test. And now that we're doing the incentives, and I tell them about the incentives after they schedule a meeting with me. I say, by the way, if you show up, I'll give you the $50. I don't tell them that in order to get them to sign up. But what we're communicating to that young man is you matter. We care about you enough that we'll pay you $50 just to show up. And I think that sends a very clear maybe unconscious, but a pretty clear message that he's valued. And so that's the other reason we wait on that first meeting.
And that is, again, similar to the different elements of just the heart of who we see within the movement. It's they don't see the value in themselves, female or men. And to your point earlier about this is hopefully to break a cycle and fix a broken cycle and start a new one where families are embraced, encouraged. They see the healthiness that can be within relationships and growth, and then the good that comes from that, which actually does bring me to my next question about the mothers. So as you're watching the men walk through this discipleship program, how have you seen it impact the women in their lives? Who brought them to the center?
That's a really good question, because literally in the past 2 weeks, we've had meetings and we're beginning to discuss how can this women's program that's been around forever and this men's program that's new, both very fruitful in their own ways, how can this become more of an overlapping kind of thing? So the women's program, we call it baby prep here at Life Choices. It is, by necessity, it is mentoring. It's for the pregnancy, how to breastfeed, how to swaddle, nutrition, all the things that these usually first-time moms need to learn about pregnancy. It's critical that they get that practical mentoring, but that's not what we do for the men. So the real question that we're facing with is, how do we then transition the women from the practical mentoring into biblical discipleship, and where do those things come together? As individuals or as couples, if they are couples. And most of them are. Most of them who come in, they consider themselves in long-term relationships. But it's had an incredible impact on our center. Stories, people love stories. I've got so many stories. And then they get propagated and retold. One of the things Rachel says that's very gratifying is that 27 is the piece that we've always been missing and didn't even know it until we had it. And so it's kind of not that Life Choices was deficient in any way. It's an incredible pregnancy center, but it's kind of completed the picture to have this more holistic, all in for everybody. But that's the nature of the movement, right? Over the past, 45, 50 years. First, it was all about saving babies. Then it became about women. And for the most part, it's pretty recent that fatherhood, men's programs have become a thing. But it really does make the center much more comprehensive in its ministry to the community.
And to that point, I think that has been something that has unveiled itself over the years, because there have been various men's programs out there, and what we have seen, and part of it is just how our nation has changed, because the family unit up until 20 to 30 years ago was more of a firm element, good, bad, and ugly, but it was not as common today as divorce and single parenthood and things like that. So we've had to shift gears over the years and adapt, as we do, to meet the needs in those moments. And I think that we have hit a cultural tipping point of families are essential. And for whatever reason, there's been a brokenness, tearing families apart and saying that you don't need to have a mother and a father, or single parenting is not only accepted, but empowering. And it's like, oh, but there's so much good. And there's scientific studies all over the place that show
of course.
Both parents together and growing it.
Well,
and
imagine
I think
that's how God designed it, right? It works. It really works.
We really need to stop playing God and trying to figure things out when there's a beautiful book that is an instruction manual as to how to live and show us.
There's 27 in a nutshell. Let's just get them in the Word of God and build their life on that. And all the peripheral stuff, all the practical stuff, it'll work itself out. So that's what, not only have we learned that those things don't work, or the message is you don't need it, the government incentivizes it. Literally incentivizes brokenness. It's absolute insanity. I had a guy in here last week for his first visit. I've got a scheduled meeting with him this week, his intake meeting. I hope he shows up. He was here with his girlfriend. I always ask the guys when I met, hey, is this your first pregnancy? He said no. He had to think about it for a minute. He said, this is my 8th. I said, I'm sorry, you have 7 children and this is your 8th? He said, yeah. And I was scared to ask, how many mothers? 8. He's about to have his 8th child by the eighth different mother. Absolute dysfunction, destruction, chaos. How can you build a life out of that? These children, how can they build a life out of that? So that's what we're down. That's an extreme example, but that's what we're trying to reach into. And as Paul said, to shine the light of the glory of the gospel of Christ into these lives, into these homes, and see God redeem and rebuild these tragic stories.
One family at a time, too.
That's right.
Tell us about the name 27.
Proverbs 27, the righteous man who walks in his integrity, blessed are his children after him. That's where it came from. Proverbs 27.
Was that the inspiration at the very beginning, or did you guys have...
I inherited that. I inherited the name. And our CEO, Shelley Sumner, came up with that at some point in the past, I guess 2 or 3 years ago, and in the attempts to get something going. And it kind of stuck around and lingered. And honestly, I wasn't a big fan of it initially, but I think that's because it came with the very feminine logo. And we kind of repackaged it, rebranded it. Now I love it. I absolutely love it. And, it goes on everything we do. And 27, one of the very gracious things that's happened just recently, I said I've come on full time a couple of months ago. So the board brought me on full time and made me a director, which is great. The title's not important, but what that means is that the program is a thing. Our board has recognized that this isn't just a men's activity under client services. This is its own thing that needs its own budget, its own director, its own attention, its own promotion. And of course, that's not to say it operates apart from life choices. And we are aware that we do what we do. We have to be careful of mission drift, mission creep, and we're not going to try to become something we're not. But God's hand is on this thing. And I do get asked, so Justin, how do you do this? How did you do this? I really have no idea. We didn't have this strategy to build what God is doing. God is just at work. And I love us meditating just on my evening walk a couple of nights ago in Philippians 1. Paul talks to the Christians there, and it's such an incredibly affectionate letter. And Paul talks about their partnership in the gospel. But in chapter 1, verse 5, he refers to them as partakers with me of grace. So he's commending their partnership with him in his ministry. But he's saying, look, there's a grace on this ministry. There's an empowerment on this ministry. And because you partner with me, you get to partake of that grace. But I think that's incredible. He said elsewhere that I work harder than anyone, but not me. It's God at work in me. So God's grace is on it. His empowerment is on it. We didn't manufacture it. I have a formal job description, a director's job description. I say my job description, or the way I describe my job, is I'm having a blast. I'm just along for the ride, and I'm trying to steward well what God is doing. And that is, God is at work, and we are trying to be good stewards of it. And we're having a lot of fun. A lot of heartache, a little bit of heartache, but a whole lot of fun.
Well, and I think that your journey has been able to prepare you for this time in life because of the understanding of grace and redemption.
Yes.
And seeing that in these men's lives as they are entering the doors and the potential that they have. And as you noted, I mean, even just being that first point of contact in probably years to show respect and that you see value in them. And the love that love of God that shows them just through that encounter is really quite inspirational and encouraging, and probably having the most impact by getting that first yes, or planting those seeds along the way, even to those that don't take the call. But you showed them respect, just like we would hope for anybody to do with any woman entering the doors. You're offering that love of God to those in the room.
We had a young guy. He's connected one-on-one for several months, But early on in that journey, in fact, it was his second visit. The details of the story don't matter, but he's very inappropriate on his first visit, and I talked to him about it. And so when he came back, he had made those corrections. And so I just pulled him aside and I looked at him, just this, very close, very personal space. And I looked at him. His name's not John, but I just said, John, man, I'm proud of you. His face, Andrea, he has probably never heard another man look at him and say, I'm proud of you. And honestly, there wasn't a whole lot in his life at that time to be proud of. One of the questions I ask when I start meeting with these guys is, if your son grows up to be the man you are today, how would that make you feel? And the first time I asked him that, he just literally hung his head in shame and just started shaking his head and said, I don't want him to be like me. And then a few months later, when we were in our first Bible study book, I added that question in the curriculum. And we got to that question, and I forgot all about it. He said, I remember the first time you asked me that. And his face lit up, and he said, I'd be proud if my son is like me. Only God can do that. Only God can do that. So that's just a small sample of the transformation that happens with these guys when they really are loved, when they're invested in, and we try to pour our lives into them. It's very fruitful, very gratifying.
I love that you had that opportunity and didn't even realize it at the time that you were asking him the same question that you asked, and he gave you the aha moment to include that. That's very fun to see his reaction there. Mm-hmm. That shows how meaningful it was because he remembered. He knew. Yeah. That stuck with him. Okay, so as we have been watching the importance of fathers grow, and we document this, and we're starting to see a heightened percentage every year of more pregnancy help organizations, including some sort of a program. What would you encourage the center to do? I love that you mentioned mission drift, because that shows the fact that you guys were asking the question shows that you were aware of this is something that we need to be certain is included in our mission, that we have everybody on board. But I also know that along the way, you may have encountered some or figured out some tips to offer and some mistakes to avoid. Would you mind sharing?
The tips, I don't mean to sound simplistic, but don't shy away from the Bible. Don't shy away from the gospel. Be assertive. These young men need leadership. They probably have no godly leadership in their lives, and they need it, and they'll respond to it. Not all of them. Some of them you push a little bit and they're going to run away. You can't control that. But I think generally young men in particular, live up or down to the expectations we put on them. And when you believe in them, and I don't mean obviously in a humanistic way, but when you believe in them, they'll respond to that. So we are just very aggressive with the Word of God, with the gospel, and with really becoming a part of their lives, one-on-one, all in, very intentionally. And if some centers feel like they're not equipped to do the obvious question, Justin, where do you get your guys? Where do you get all these mentors? We connect with churches. I go in front of churches. Our staff goes in front of churches, men's Bible studies, things like that. And we focus on, of course, we're in Memphis, the buckle of the Bible Belt. There are churches all over the place, but not all of them are discipleship oriented. Not all of them are filled with men who are really themselves living in the Word of God. But we try to partner with those churches, and we've got some incredible partners in our church community that have been on board with us for years. And now there's a men's program. So historically, it's been the women in their churches who come to the banquet, who serve as baby prep volunteers, who are oriented with the ministry. And now the men, their husbands, they're like, oh, you've got something for me. And they get excited about it. And again, as the stories begin to propagate, and they see what's happening in these lives and what their buddies are doing with their young men, it just generates enthusiasm. So I would say develop close relationships with your churches. Give those men a vision and an opportunity that you can be a part of changing generational legacies. And all you have to do is connect to a young guy and really pour your life into him. And, resource it. Give him the resource. As I said, we're developing our own resources, but there's so much material out there that it's not that difficult to do if you just have a desire to do it. Keep it simple. Maybe that's the ultimate rule. Just keep it simple. Jesus, the Word, and a man. That's what it's all about for us.
When you noted working with the churches, the good news is most centers already have those relationships with churches because of the women and the way.
Yes.
And I love, you're right. It's now there is a place more readily available for men to get involved. So this is really good. Thank you for the practical tips. Thank you for your time today, Justin.
This is great.
It's wonderful getting to know you, hearing your story, hearing your journey to life choices and the growth that has been able to happen and the lives that are being transformed within just a year and a half. Like, I am excited, and I do want to do a follow-up in a couple of months to see how the new incentive program is going, because these are wonderful ways that we can get involved more readily, more intentionally with the families and grow them, as we are, again, watching this understanding that family is core to so much success and healthy relationships and breaking cycles of poverty and violence in many ways as well. And so the more that we can personally invest within our communities, the better. And this is a great way to introduce a new way to connect with the community. So thank you for all that you're doing with 27. Thank you for all that you're doing at Life Choices. And I look forward to talking with you again soon.
I would love that. Thanks. It's good being with you.